Good morning. Welcome to the 32nd Annual Eggs and Issues, hosted by the Spencer Chamber of Commerce. Today's forum is sponsored by Clay County Farm Bureau. I'm Sharifa Jones, Executive Director of the Spencer Chamber of Commerce, and I will be your moderator today. I'd like to thank Spencer Municipal Utilities and KICD for live streaming, and Mediacom, who is recording for later broadcasting. We will start today by having our guest legislators give a brief opening statement, and then I will begin to ask them questions that have been submitted to the Chamber by area citizens. Please remember, the goal of this forum is to cover as many topics as possible in the time allowed. All questions will be shared with the legislators so they may follow up with those who ask the questions. Next, I'd like to thank our legislators for giving of their time in this informational forum. Let's start with our opening statements today. Today, we have Senator Lynn Evans, Senator Dave Raleigh, State Representative Megan Jones, and State Representative John Wills. And with that, we will start with you, Senator Evans, with your opening statement.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you to Clay County Farm Bureau for hosting and sponsoring this event this week. We're at that point in time in the legislature where individual bills can no longer be submitted. That ended on Friday. Still some opening for committee bills if necessary, but we're quickly approaching that time where we need to get bills through subcommittee and committee before our funnel week. And if you're going to ask the senators about what's going on in the House, or the House what's going on in the Senate, we're probably not going to be directly familiar with those bills. So if you say the bill number, please make sure you tell us what the bill's about a little bit. We're somewhat familiar with each other's chambers, but we're working pretty hard on getting our own bills through and then over to the other chambers so then we can start some good, rich conversations between the two. And with that, I'm looking forward to hearing the questions from the crowd today. And again, thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, Senator Evans and Representative Jones.
Well, thank you all for being here today. And I'll just expand on Senator Evans' comments a little bit. This last week, I went over to a Senate subcommittee, and the world was shook. I had so many people asking me and texting me, even during the meeting, why are you in the Senate? Why are you at that Senate subcommittee? It was just so outlandish for a House member to be over in the Senate during when we're doing all these subcommittee meetings. I was just curious about what was happening. But we are very much entrenched in our own chambers right now and working, and it's all very busy. And so for a House member to be over in the Senate, apparently it causes quite a stir. But that's okay. It was kind of fun. I'm going to have to visit you guys more often. I try to pop in about once a day to just see what you're working on, but apparently heading to a subcommittee was quite a thing.
I head over to your chamber quite a bit. So you're always invited to come over and see us.
Of course. But going to formal meetings, apparently that was just an oddity, but it was really interesting nonetheless. In any case, this is kind of an interesting time in the session because every bill is a live round, and a lot of bills just get tossed in because someone sends them an email, hey, why don't you try to fix this? And then they get the language, they okay it, and then it's maybe not what they originally intended, or it has some unintended consequences. So as I said in my my newsletter last week, this is kind of the silly season in session, and that those bills that probably were half-baked, weren't thought out, or were just kind of tossed in haphazardly, just to kind of start a conversation, those are still live rounds, and so people tend to get kind of nervous then, and you see these Facebook posts, well, why is the legislature even considering this? We're probably not. But we got to have that conversation because the bill was tossed in, or, just because a bill was introduced doesn't mean it has legs. So we're working through that process. Once we hit that funnel deadline where bills have to have made progress out of a committee, you'll start to get a better idea of what bills are eligible for debate. There'll be still a few that sneak through the committee process that still need a lot of work, but we'll get there. And so I understand this time of session can be a little stressful because there's so many ideas and so many topics, and some of this stuff is like, what in the world were they thinking? And oftentimes we look at each other and think, yeah, what were they thinking? We don't know if people are introducing bills until they're introduced. So just because something was introduced doesn't mean that we're necessarily supportive of it or that we're engaged in it at all. It just has to have that process. So we'll take care of some of those bills as the session progresses. But I look forward to your questions today, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Representative Jones and Senator Raleigh.
Well, I just want to start by saying thank you also to the Clay County Farm Bureau and all of you for making the drive down here. It's great to see you. I've got a little scratchy voice, so you have to excuse me. I do want to say that Representative Jones is welcome to the Senate when she wants to visit. The coffee is very good and usually hot, and so that's an open invitation, I suppose.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I wasn't here last time, so just give you an overview of the committees I sit on. Health and Human Services, Commerce, Judiciary. I'm on the Appropriations Committee, the Subcommittee for Administration and Regulations. I'm the Vice Chair of that. I also sit on the Ways and Means, and I'm Vice Chair of that standing committee, and Chair of the Ethics Committee. So to kick off this whole session, we had to address some resolutions, through the Ethics Committee, and that was the first floor debate we had, which was non-confrontational. It was a very easy one to go through. The way I see it, too, I believe the first funnel is March 7th is the date. So if you're looking at your calendars, that's when everything comes out. Just a quick overview, and Representative Jones did a good job of this. The types of bills, all the activity that goes on. Keep in mind there's individual bills, there's constituent bills, there's committee bills, there's department bills, and the governor's office bills. There's a lot of them that we work on. And I think most of the work that I've seen up to this time has been getting those bills ready. I mean, there's a lot of bills we work on that need amendment, need some tweaking. Certainly education, with Senator Evans and the House have been working on that as well. But I tell you what, that's all the opening remarks I have, and I look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you, Senator Raleigh and Representative Wills.
I want to say thank you as well. Thanks to the Farm Bureau for hosting. I will say this, that when I left Spirit Lake, we had just a dusting of snow, and as further south I came, there's more. So you definitely have more snow than we have up in Spirit Lake. So thanks for making it out on this snowy day. Although we're northwest Iowa, and somebody said outside, this is true, this is nothing for us. But we have been working hard in the House, and I'm sure the Senate has too. But like everybody said, we hardly know what's going on in the Senate, and they hardly know what's going on in the House. Just like, I'll even expand and say, I hardly know anything that's happening in other committees right now, much less I know what's happening in the committees that I belong to, but the committees outside of what I belong to, I'm not concentrating on that at all, because we're all gearing up towards funnel, which, as Senator Raleigh just said, is coming up in March. That first funnel, anything for it to be alive must be out of committee and eligible for floor debate. And that's the hurdle that we're trying to get to, is concentrate on that small group efforts and so forth. I will say that this week we did pass two actions on the House floor. This week we passed state supplemental aid back to the Senate. They sent 2% state supplemental aid. We sent 2.25. I would bet there'll be a question or two about that today. We also passed a resolution supporting Israel on the House floor, and I think that was a very, very good resolution. We did the same type of resolution last year supporting Israel against the war that was started by savages, quite frankly, and we need to support one of our closest friends in the Middle East. I will say that the value of this, sometimes people say, well, do people come to these forums? Do people talk? And what's the purpose of the forums? Let me just say this. I value you all coming here. I value your questions. I value listening. So between the first session, between the first forum and the several forums in between, I've heard a lot of stuff about property taxes. And so did my friend Carter Nordman. And so Carter Nordman and I, he's a state representative from south of here, we sat down one day and we started just game planning. We started brainstorming. What can we do? We heard a lot of stuff about property taxes. So we actually, this last week, we submitted 2 individual bills that we both co-sponsor. The first one is simply saying that the state of Iowa will invest some money to hire, you've all heard of business efficiency experts. we will hire a state government efficiency expert that will travel to the counties and all property taxing entities. So community colleges, counties, cities, schools, hospitals, those are the big ones. They will travel to those over the period of the contract. They will travel to every county and to every one of those taxing entities and offer advice on how that taxing entity can be more efficient, can be more better at their job, so that you, the taxpayer, the property taxpayer, get a benefit. You will have less property taxes. That's the theory. The second bill that we submitted was a bill that says that if that study or if that government efficiency expert that is hired by the state should happen to come up with ideas that says, you know, the city and the county could go together on treasury type stuff, and they could form an agreement. So the bill says that governmental entities at any level in the state of Iowa can partner together and basically work together on issues to become more efficient through mutual agreement. I think those are two great bills, and it came out of this kind of forum. It came out of us listening to you and hearing what you have to say about property taxes. And I would say each one of us could say that exact same thing has happened at listening sessions just like this. And so I want to just kind of say thank you for being here. I want to let you know that we do listen to what you have to say, and we do respond. Sometimes we don't always tell you. And so I just wanted to make a point of just giving you that one example of just in the first month and a half of the session, that stuff does happen. So thank you. I'm glad you're here. I want to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wills. With that, we'll go ahead and start our questions. I will remind you that as I do invite you to come up to the microphone, it is on. Please keep your comment or question to about 2 minutes. First individual will be Lenny Scaletta. Lenny has a question regarding women veterans.
Well, question or suggestion, whatever it is. Bottom line is that as a Vietnam veteran, it took me a long time to realize that, excuse me, it's not a cold or anything, but to realize that, getting out around other Vietnam veterans, I learned a lot. I have somebody to lean on and different things like that. And then I thought about lady veterans, because they've been, just like Vietnam veterans and every other veteran, they've been pushed in the corner. Just get out of here. And no, you're not alone. And around here, it seems to be working well. Over the past 10 years, I've introduced one woman to another woman veteran, and they've thanked me for it because they got somebody to lean on again. So around here, the Katie Ginger, who runs the Clay County Department of Veterans Affairs, is great, and she's wanting to get, like little coffee get together with lady veterans, and she's working on that, but it's hard to get them out and maybe get them the disability that they deserve. They're going to spend the money here in Iowa, so everybody wins, especially them. But am I asking you to introduce a bill? No. But am I asking you to get the word out, and, from in the House and Senate? Yes, maybe if you can do something like that to just get the word out. Maybe add things to it. That's all. None of us are smart as all of us. If we all work together, we can get them the recognition that they deserve.
Thank you, Lenny. With that, Representative Wills, I will invite you to comment.
Yeah, I would say that as a veteran myself, 25 years in the military and serving in several war zones, I think this is important. I think that it is a tremendously important thing. I think that it can be done through several different ways. It doesn't always need to be the government. I'm a member of the VFW. There's the American Legion. There's other groups that can offer support and offer the same kind of thing that you just talked about, where they're having small groups of maybe just women getting together. Those groups can do that same thing without government assistance. I will say that I'm working with, and I'm trying to remember, I'm going off of memory now, but about 4 weeks ago, I worked with a small group of legislators to basically provide more money so that our local veterans agencies in each county has a allocation, $10,000, a small amount that comes from the lottery. And so we're actually going to look at providing more money from the lottery to our local county veterans organization that can be used, and that could be used for that kind of thing exactly. I know that in Dickinson County, our veteran service officer has coffees in the morning, not just for women, but for all veterans to be able to come in on once a week or something like that. So I think those are kind of things that we can do. Those are things that we can do as a state, is provide money to that local government. The state's not going to be able to form a statewide group. It just isn't feasible. But a county group could be easily formed, or a county on the county level could be easily done. But it doesn't always need to be government either. Those local veterans groups could do a very fine job of something like that.
But just if you can get the word out to everybody, though, okay.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Raleigh.
You know, it's interesting that Representative Wills just brought up the fact that brainstorming, getting ideas from forums, I just want to commend you. It's a great idea. It's something to get it out there. I think the most powerful part of what you just said is the awareness, and to get it out there on the table. Start the brainstorming, start that connection. I mean, look what Spencer's been through this whole year. Everybody's got to work together on these issues and these problems. And certainly, if women veterans are being ignored or overlooked in any way, I definitely would support anything we can do to help that. Again, back to Representative Will's point, if it could be done at the local area, and also, you know, with the support that's already out there, coordinate that and bring that awareness, I would say that's your best route. Get that out and then just keep pushing that envelope and working with Katie, you know, and the associates she works with throughout the state. But I want to thank you for bringing it up, Lenny. It was a great thing to bring up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And Representative Jones.
Thank you, Sharifa, and thank you, Lenny, for bringing this up. You and I have talked about this on the phone a little bit, and I think we agreed then that there probably wasn't a mechanism at the state level, but we do have a microphone, right? And so today is a great example of that. I think this forum is televised in 6 states, so you've made some pretty good reach here already. But kudos to the paper and the Daily Reporter, and then also KICD who give us some much needed publicity over these things. So I will say, last session I had somebody email me and said, Megan, you need to start doing forums. I said, well, we've been doing forums in Spencer. I think this is 30 years or so. I mean, I can still remember back to the days of Jack Kibbe and Marcy Freevert, but what that hit home for me was that people still don't know that these forums happen. So try as we might. I mean, the chamber, you guys send out emails about these forums months in advance, and kudos to you for doing that. So, but my point is that we need to be talking to our friends and neighbors, and when we find a veteran, we should try to send them in the right direction. So thank you for bringing awareness to it, but we all have a part to play in getting that word out. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jones. We're going to have Senator Evans go, and then I know Representative Wills would like to come back as well.
I know my own personal story is probably not too dissimilar to others in the room. I have 3 uncles from southern Iowa who were all in the early parts of Vietnam War. 2 of them lost their life as a result of that. One of them was exposure to chemical agents, and then after his discharge, passed away of cancer. Another one lost his life during the conflict, and third just had his 90th birthday. He lives out in Georgia, but suffers from what we now call PTSD. They didn't call it that at the time. So I've seen effects. My own brother's a veteran, served in a couple of different conflicts with the Air Force, and he was with a unit that guarded dignitaries overseas when they were on Air Force bases. And at one point in time, there were 20 of them that were sent in. He has never said, I just always assumed it was Turkey, but he can't talk about it. Was exposed to something while over there, a chemical agent. He is one of 2 still alive. Now, my brother is in his early 50s now. All have similar symptoms, present themselves as MS, although it's not MS. The other one that's alive has been in a nursing home since his early 40s. My brother's still functional, able to earn a living, is controlled with medication, but is partially disabled from the military as a result. So I have a heart for the things that you're trying to promote here, and if we can recognize our women's veterans a little more efficiently and help our counties to address that in a better manner, I'm all for it. So thanks, Lenny, for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Senator Evans. Representative Wills?
Thank you again for the second time. One of the dangers of going first is sometimes you don't get the best answer out. And I want to just kind of circle back because Lenny raised a question about women veterans, and sometimes people are like, well, veterans are veterans. And I want to kind of just give you an example. So I was on a base of 12,000 Marines, Airmen, and soldiers. I'm an Army guy, but I was on a base of 12,000. It was a Marine base, 12,000 Marines, Airmen, and soldiers. And I was the sexual assault response coordinator for that base. Women have a different experience in the military. And so what I want to just reinforce what you're saying is that women have to have a support group of their own because of that. They have a different experience. I never once investigated a sexual assault on a man when I was in that base in Iraq. And so that's a different experience that women have to understand, that they have different things that they will need to deal with. And so I want to reinforce so that everybody understands that we're just not talking about, well, just women or men. No, there's a different experience in a military setting for that. So I just wanted to just say that. Thank you.
Most men were psychologically abused, but I can't imagine being physically as well as psychologically abused. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wills, and thank you, Lenny. Our next question, I would invite Bethany Schiefelbein to the microphone. Bethany has a question regarding Senate File 167.
Hi, yes. So for those of you in the audience who picked up the Rowley report and also notes from Senator Evans, both of those highlight some of the information on Senate File 167, which has to do with a 2.25% increase in the public schools state supplementary assistance rate per student. That rate really is woefully inadequate. Iowa has been underfunding our public schools for the past decade or more. That SSA rate increase since 2015 has been 1 to 3% per year, which does not come close to meeting our cost of living increases or therefore the costs that school districts have faced. As we currently stand, you'll notice that Rowley identifies that the state spending per student is $7,983 per student. That still remains more than $2,000 less than the national average. We have a goal of returning Iowa to be the #1 state in education, but we cannot do that without adequately funding it. Our schools are a foundation of our community. Educated students become capable adults who build businesses, organizations, and families. Our public schools and our private schools both teach teamwork, communication, reading, math, technology, and critical thinking. Every job in our town requires these skills, from retail to nurses, teachers, physicians, and all of the construction crews and electricians rebuilding us post-flood. Our family have 4 Spencer Tiger daughters. I have 3 of them here with me today because multiple backup daycares sort of fell through. We love our public school, our teachers, and our bus drivers. We love the extracurriculars, especially that start in 6th grade, that public schools sponsor. Our communities are already locally seeing the negative aftermath of underfunding education. 10 years ago, Spencer teaching positions typically had around 20 applicants. Now, a single position in the Spencer School District has not had a single applicant in over a month of being posted, and this has become the norm. Our school districts are not an attractive place for teachers to apply. Our award-winning hospital, where I'm very proud to work, has been facing a nursing shortage for years with no end in sight. Those nurses required skilled education from kindergarten on up. Iowa also ranks 44th in the nation for patient-to-physician ratio. I'm aware there's many incentives working forward to improve that, but again, in order to have qualified physicians, that starts with preschool. Also, area police and state patrol positions are very short of qualified applicants and have not been able to fill some current training. The survival of our future communities and economies depends on educated young people. Our teachers, support staff, and bus drivers deserve living wages and raises. You'll see that Rowley highlights that a teacher pay increase passed in 2024, which is $50,000 for beginning teachers and $62,500 for experienced teachers, is wonderful, but it still needs to be funded. If it's not funded through the state, that requires some funding via property tax increases. our SSA increase should be 4% at minimum, and 5% is very reasonable. And I will just take my comments sitting down since I have my kiddos over there. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. With that, we are going to start with Senator Rowley.
Well, thanks for your comments and an overview. You know, Iowa right now sits somewhere in the middle of the pack as far as compared to other states around the nation. You've got a high of New York spending $24,000 per student at the very high, and I think it goes all the way down to $7,800 with another state. So we're really sitting pretty well at that pack. Currently, we spend in this budget $235 million is going to the schools. Since I've been in the legislature with the 2, 2, 3, and 2, I believe, over the last 4 years of SSA, you know, you can add up those numbers, and we're looking at $700 to $800 million, you know, that has been going to K through 12. And I'm all for the schools, totally for it. But I have talked to supervisors or superintendents, past and also current, that they're looking for just a solid budget, a number, and a budget going forward, and they can work with that 2%. As far as the teachers' wages, the legislature and the governor signed into law the increase, of course, for teachers' wages, and we're hoping to draw. Pardon me? No, I'm talking about last year, at the end of last session. You know, now we're doing, you know, we're in the middle of that for the beginning salary as well as bringing the experienced teachers up as well. So I think we're in that transition form. I think the budget itself, we want to be fiscally prudent going forward and make sure that it's sustainable. And it's a budget that we can offer that's going to keep the schools working fine and taking care of the needs that they have right now. Also, you know, with the changes going on as far as the transition for the ESAs, there's going to be some shifts on that as well. There may be smaller classroom sizes, you know, and there may be an adjustment on that as well. So I think the 2%, the 2.25% that the House has proposed and all that, I do think it's reasonable. And I think going forward we can work together with the schools, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rowley. Representative Wills.
You threw me for a loop there. I was like, I'll be last or something. But I just want to address first, you packaged a lot in there. So let me just say this. Every job class in the state of Iowa has workforce issues. It's a workforce issue that we've been working towards for a number of years. But nursing has a workforce issue. Police have a workforce issue. Every job class, teachers have a workforce issue. Last year we did pass the teacher salary increase. Beginning teachers $50,000, and we funded half of it to $47,500. The bills that we just, I think your chamber had it as well, our chamber did too, finished and funded it up to $50,000. Experienced teachers, $62,500, we funded up to $60,000 maybe last year, and this year we'll complete that funding and fund it up to $62,500 this year. I think both chambers have that. The House passed 2.25, which is I think $114 million of new money. All right, right now schools, public schools receive about $3.8 billion in our budget out of a $9 billion budget, 7-point-something billion dollar budget, 8-point-something billion dollar budget. We suggest 2.25%, which is $114 million, plus I'm going to get these numbers wrong, I'm going off the memory, but $5 million additional for transportation. Some schools transport their kids further, and so they pay more, which means less goes to education. And so we're going to give those schools that transport kids more money, transportation equity we call it. There is a thing in the state funding budget that says that some schools get less per student. So we're trying to equalize that. So we're giving more money for funding inequities. We've got several other categories to the point where the package that the House has proposed and sent back to the Senate is about 3.8% total funding for that package, include I think about 20 million just for inflation adjustments. so that schools can better handle some inflation problems. So that's what the House has done. That's where we're at as far as what we have sent back to the Senate, their bill back to the Senate. Now what's going to have to happen is they're going to have to say yes, no, no, yes, or put their bill back onto ours and send it back to us and insist on their bill. That's where we're at. And so we'll see what happens next week or in the upcoming weeks. I agree with what Senator Rowley said. Every superintendent that I've talked to said, at this point, we don't care what you give us, just give it to us early. Give it to us as soon as possible. Senator Evans, having been a superintendent, might have a different story. We'll hear from him what he has to say. But we are working towards that. We are working towards providing an adequate funding for schools. I will say that I've been in the legislature for 10 years. We have increased school funding $1 billion in 10 years. $1 billion. So it kind of fries me a little bit when people say that we're underfunding education, because that's just not true. We are maybe not giving what the teachers union want, but we are providing increases. We also have given, not too many years ago, I can't remember which year, 4% increase. But we don't get told that back to us. Thanks for the 4% several years ago. We are funding education. We are providing increases. Maybe it's not to what your liking is. I have asked of the people who said, we need 5%. They just say 5% because that's what the teachers union has said. I say, or they say, you need to fund teaching or education adequately. I ask the question, what is adequate? And nobody can give me an answer back. It's just 5%. 5% is adequate. And then I say, why? Nobody can give me an answer to that. So we need to have some specifics, but I will tell you this. We have funded education. We have provided funding for education to $1 billion over the last 10 years. New money, $1 billion out of an $8 billion, $9 billion budget. That's an increase of funding. That's a significant increase of funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wills. Senator Evans.
Yeah, Representative Wilson, you may not have this number right in front of you, but I've done the math on the House's version of the SSA, and everyone wants to drill in on the 2% or the 2.25%, and it's a fallacy. I'm going to tell you that straight up front. When you put the pencil to the paper on what the House is projecting, it's a 4.3% increase of total funds. So I don't know. You can go back and check me if you like, John, but I know it's well in excess of 4%. When you add in transportation equity that they have, what that does is raise. There's already some transportation equity funds, and the intent was to get it up so everybody, if you are below the state average on transportation cost, it raises you up to that. So we have a wide range of district sizes in the state, from multiple counties. When I was at North Iowa Buffalo Center, we were 425 square miles, down to West Burlington, which I think is 2 square miles. Okay, so there's a lot of inequity in transporting kids to school. So the House's version, ours didn't have it in it, but the House's version has bringing that up to the average. Ours just uses the 2%, applying it to a 2% increase in transportation equity dollars. So something that is being done there. They have an inflation reduction one-time amount, which is 20 million-ish, roughly. A renewal of the support staff that we gave last year. There was a bump in support staff, $14 million that could be used for support staff. The intent was teachers, associates, but it could be applied to any support staff member. That was supposed to be a one-time funding. The House has that back in additional. The governor also had that back in her budget as an additional one-time. So continuing to honor that, even though it was never promised moving forward. When you look at our state budget as a whole, just under 50% of our entire state budget, and the state budget that the governor put out is $9.4 billion. Just under half of that is K-12 education. When you put in college, community colleges, regent universities, Iowa tuition grant, all those type of things, you're at 53% of the state budget. So 53% of $9.4 billion goes to education. Is that public and private That is, yes, includes everything. Okay. Now I want you to I'm giving you a pause, old teacher in me, a little wait time here. Think on that. We also have needs in childcare. That's not education funding. That's HHS. We have recruitment needs in all of our medical fields. That doesn't come out of education. That's got to come out of HHS or somewhere. We are woefully underfunding our judges in this state. And it's why we have a hard time getting what I call really good applicants, and a number of them, to apply when we have district judge openings or appellate court judges, even at your local level, to step up and be a magistrate and those type of things. You can make a lot more money in private practice, but we need those good services locally and across our state. Where's that funding coming from? Everybody at the Capitol, they have a request and they always have their hand out. I was guilty of it too. Still am. You know, would I like to see 3% for K-12 education? Yes, but I lived in a time, and people have short memories, when that Capitol was run, all three chambers, by the Democrat Party, and they were responsible for putting forth a budget. They don't remember that I received 1%, 0.5%, 2%, multiple times while I was superintendent during those days. Well, I haven't got there yet. Don't take the punchline. I sat at my desk at HMS as a superintendent. I knew a cut was coming because they had completely mismanaged the budget, and everybody could see it. And it was in October, just a few short months after they passed a promise. When you pass a budget, that's a promise to your taxpayers that you're going to fulfill their needs based on the budget that's been put forth. It may not meet everyone's needs or may not be exactly what everybody wanted, but we will fund this. Am I correct in that? 10% across the board cut in October, a few short months after passing a budget, making a promise to all of us that they were going to fulfill, and they did not. It didn't just affect education, it affected every agency that was funded by the state government. Little school like Hartley Melvin Sanborn, now it goes retroactive back to the beginning of my budget year, lost $360,000. Where am I coming up with $360,000? There's not enough couches to shake change out of to find $360,000 mid-year. Fortunately, we always practiced good conservative budgeting practices, and we had some cash reserves that we could rely on, but we had to backfill those. And you know how you backfill your cash reserves? Through a cash reserve levy, which is direct property tax. So it forced school boards across the state to enact a property tax levy, the vast majority of which did, because you're foolish not to. We phased ours in over 5 years, but a lot of school districts did theirs 1 year. And you can fact check me on this if you want, go back and look. I contend that that was the largest property tax increase in our lifetimes in the state of Iowa as a result of that. Put back onto school board members, county supervisors, city councilmen to impose property taxes on local citizens. What this budget does is ensure that not only this year, we're going to meet the promises that we make. And we're going to fulfill that funding, not just to schools, but to every agency that we promise to. And we're not going to take it away. And it's sustainable over time. Is it where I want it to be? Probably not. I think 3% is probably a sweet spot. If that's where you're going to start every year, as a former superintendent, if you could get me 3%, I don't have to worry too much on my budget. But at 2%, you know what? I started building my budget in December. I started on 0%, and I've already looked at the things that I can move around within my own budget. The governor puts hers out, or his out, depending on whoever's in that seat. If you look back historically, we're always within a fraction of a percentage, north or south, of what the governor puts out in their budget anyway. So when I hear that budget come out in January, I'm going, okay, it's going to be somewhere around 2%. Now I can go back and I can sharpen my pencil again and start working on that at 2%. And with the goal, and we never meet this, and literally it's a crime we don't because it's an Iowa code. We have 30 days from when the governor announces her budget to release what we're going to put out for the school budgets. 30 days. That was Thursday. It's always been my mission, and now I have a little bit more control, that we're going to start that process immediately, and we're going to get it over to the House so they can work on it. We took the governor's budget at 2%. Common sense says it's going to fall somewhere in that area. That's the number we used. We actually did take out the one-time funding for support staff, anticipating it was probably going to get put back in. Kicked it over to the House so they could start their work on it. They got that out on Thursday. I'm confident within the next few days we're going to have some resolution between the chambers. We're still long on that day, but we're getting better at it. My goal is that we're going to be able to tell superintendents and school boards well ahead of the deadlines they have to meet so they can start working on their budgets as well. And I've met twice now since session started with area superintendents, this area. A lot of them are people that I actually worked with directly and are friends with. To a person, they want a positive number and they want to know on time. Of course they want more. But tell me as soon as we can get started. And then we can start. They've also negotiated. I've heard feedback on different little pieces they would like to see in as well. And we're going to try to get some of those in. Timeliness is, in my opinion, the most important, and making sure we do not cut them after we've promised that we're going to fund them. So, thanks.
Thank you, Senator Evans and Representative Jones.
Well, I'm not really sure how to follow that. I think you laid it out quite well. Every area of the budget, every area of our workforce, every area of our economy is feeling a crunch. Medicaid is a huge driver of our state's budget, and a lot of that we don't have a whole lot of control over. There's a lot of federal strings involved in Medicaid, and what that means when the two biggest budgets in our state's budget are both increasing year after year, is that the other pieces get a little smaller, right? And so we have to look at the budget like a pie. And oftentimes people say, well, Megan, you need to prioritize education. And we do. Education gets the first piece of the pie and the biggest. And then, and everything else gets sorted out thereafter, including Medicaid, which is largely locked up. So education is a huge priority, and the numbers just reflect that, right? It is, education funding is over 50% of our state's budget. And then when you bring in Medicaid after that, I mean, there's not a whole lot of wiggle room thereafter to fund things like the state patrol, to keep sex offenders in prison. And we don't want to talk about it, right? Like, we don't want to talk about having to fund sex offenders, but I want them in prison, right? So we've got to talk about public health. Remember 2020? That hasn't went away, and we still have pieces in our budget to make sure that that our public is staying healthy. Public safety, of course. The court system, you're exactly right, Senator Evans. We are seeing an astronomical decrease in the people who want to apply to be judges. And then we get mad about their opinions. Well, I mean, those things are correlated. So I guess I say all those things because we have to take this budget as a pie. I get a lot of emails. Actually, this year I've just gotten a handful on SSA. It hasn't been near the fire that it's been in years past. But the emails that I've said, well, you have to set it at 5%. And oftentimes folks just are picking out a number that they heard from a newsletter or on Facebook, and what that means from a bigger perspective, what that means to the state's budget. Because we have dedicated that 10-year stretch, that was over $1 billion to education funding increases. And then when you just increase it year after year after year after year, that compounds and that gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So over time, that percentage number is just going to get smaller because the budget for education is getting bigger, right? So I want to talk about a few other things, a few other mechanisms that are happening outside of SSA that are going to put more money into education. So this last week, the House Education Committee passed a bill that was at the request of Spencer Community Schools to allow them to be on budget guarantee for a second year because they don't know where all if their kids are coming back, right? So after the flood, people kind of scattered. There's still kids outside of the school district that might be going to CCE or might be going to Okoboji, might be going to Sioux Central. They're still trying to get an idea of whether those kids are coming back. And so there's a lot of influx because their funding depends on how many heads are in the district, right? And so they're in a tricky spot. And school districts like Greenfield and Rock Valley are in a similar setting in that since we don't have a lot of housing available, things are still coming online. We're just at a really kind of awkward transition. And so Spencer Community Schools asked for that bill. It came out of House Education today. Senate
a week ago came out of the education.
Okay, perfect. So it's moving right along in the Senate. I don't see any reason why that would be held up. I think that's an entirely reasonable request. And I don't know about you, Senator Evans, but when I talk about Spencer and I talk about flooding, people just say, okay, let's do it. And so our colleagues are very ready and willing to help us. So we're just making targeted asks so that we can make sure that that happens. Additionally, I think Senator Evans touched on this, but preschool. That is a big discussion that is still kind of happening. The governor made a commitment to expanding preschool offerings in the state, and that's going to be a number that's going to education. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not on the education committee or budget sub, but that's still happening as well. And then I'll just kind of conclude with echoing what Senator Evans said. I remember what happened in 2020. I remember what happened when a legislature overspent, when a legislature overpromised and underdelivered. They got out of session in March. That's unheard of. I mean, that's unheard of. But and when you ask, well, what happened? They were so efficient, they got out of session. They ran out of money. They ran out of money to spend. And so they had to get out of Des Moines because they didn't have any more money. And then they turned to our school districts and said, now you have a 10% across the board cut. Well, the legislature didn't. That was Chet Culver. That was Governor Chet Culver that turned around to our school districts and said, we overspent, and now you got to cut by 10% by October. Our school districts can't do that. We can't ask them to do that again. So we have to be thoughtful. We have to be reasonable. Of course, I would love to see that number bigger. I would. But I also am realistic about what that budget looks like. So overpromising and underdelivering, especially to the tune of 10%, that's unacceptable. So we're going to do what we can. And the House committed to 2.25. We'll have those negotiations going forward. But ultimately, we just need to get this number done.
Thank you, Representative Jones, and thank you for the conversation. I would invite Ryan Craig to the podium. He has a question regarding HSB 123.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for hosting. Thanks for having us. Appreciate you guys all coming out and getting in front of the community, so thank you for that. House Bill 123, I have some questions around economic development and the impacts that can have on service territories or retail choice for utilities. I'll start off with saying I appreciate your guys' support today and in the past, and some language has been struck and changed in that bill already, or some commitments from the governor to change that to protect service territories and economic development. So I thank you guys for that. Thank you for your continued support there. Couple things I want to bring up when we talk about economic development and service territories. In the utility world, when states deregulate, the cost goes up. And it goes up not for the large companies that want to move in to our communities. It goes up for the people in this room. And statistics have told us that if we allow retail choice, that folks in this room, their utility bills will go up close to 28%. It won't affect the large data centers. It won't affect the other large load companies. It'll affect the folks in this room. So keep that in mind as we talk about House Bill 123. And what do they get when the price goes up? They get worse service. Their response time from linemen, from gas mechanics goes down up to 30%. So, again, I want to say thank you for supporting us, and if you get a chance to see the governor, thank her for welcoming the RECs to the table and changing that language, very important. And following up, I would like to say, or ask, what are we going to do, not only in Spencer, but the communities for Iowa Lakes Electric Cooperative, that's 8 counties that we serve. What are we going to do to help maintain service territories, but reach the governor's goals when it comes to economic development? As you all know, Iowa Lakes Electric is heavily invested in economic development, not only here in Spencer, but all the counties that we serve and all the communities that we serve. And our reach doesn't go as far as just as far as our members. It's also the communities. What's good for the communities is good for our members. So I'm curious on your guys' stance on House Bill 123 and also how we plan to support economic growth in rural Iowa moving forward.
Thank you, Ryan, for your question.
Thank you.
Representative Jones, we'll start with you.
Oh, boy. So I think this is a commerce bill. I was pulling it up as you were talking, so I apologize.
Yeah, energy omnibus bill?
Yeah, holy macaroni. So this was just introduced about 10 days ago. It's sent to Commerce. I'm not on Commerce, but just for the others, this bill is huge. I don't even know how many pages. 54 pages, and it relates to electrical power generation, energy storage, transmission facility rate making, tariffs, land restoration, right of first refusal, ROFR, for those who were following that last year, energy infrastructure, loan programs, and anaerobic digesters.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. That's
is.
a lot of topics in one big old bill. So there's a lot happening there. I would guess that there's going to be some changes made there. I haven't had a lot of experience with many of those subjects that the governor's put into her bill here, except that I know that ROFR gives a lot of us some heartburn and concern. And so I don't know what this bill does on ROFR, but my stance on that, which has always been a hot potato, I didn't like it when we did it in 2020. It made me very uncomfortable, but there were some deals that had to be made to get some bills moved elsewhere, and so we pushed it through, and then the Supreme Court all but lit the legislature on fire over that piece of legislation, and then we had to come back and fix it. There was a run at it last year, and I was a no on the bill because it didn't bring our RECs and our munis to the table in consideration of that. And I will never forget the last day of session in 2024. I was opening the door to the Capitol, and it's a very heavy door, so I'm struggling, and I'm on the phone with Steve Pick from SMU, and he said, Megan, there's going to be an amendment, and I'm going to need you to support this bill. They've brought us to the table, they brought the munis in, and they brought the RECs in. And I said, okay, where's that amendment? Who's running it? And he said, oh, Megan, you are. And so I had a lot to learn that day, but we took a run at it, we took a stab at it, we tried to fix it. Because it was the last day, I couldn't get the team together. I couldn't get 51 votes. And so we tried, we did, and I thought getting the RECs and the munis together at the table, we'd be able to cross the finish line. It didn't happen. So that issue is still out there lingering. I am happy to continue to work on that, in however this bill falls, because I know that's really important to you all, and certainly to the munis as well. So I guess I don't have a lot to add other than I'm happy to have those conversations and happy to work on it. We take for granted so much what it means to have a light turn on when we flip that switch. And I know I always tell you this story when we meet in December, but there was one day for about 20 minutes that our electricity was off at the house, and we live out in the country, and we're REC members, and my kids didn't know what to do. They had no idea what to do. It was shocking to them that we did not have electricity, and it came back on rather quickly. It really was not that big of a deal. We are so very blessed for my kids to not know what it's like, to not know what not having electricity is like. So I appreciate what you all do, what your team does. Anytime we have any kind of a problem, your team is out there with a bucket truck and ready to go. So I appreciate the work that you do in making sure that our lights stay on and that our homes stay warm. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jones. Senator Evans.
Yeah, as I said earlier, it's a House study bill, so I'm not overly familiar with it. I know that it was dropped. My stance on the issue is I really don't like the idea of recruiting in these large data centers and they get to set up shop wherever they like, but shop around their rates. Something just doesn't seem right to me about that. Now I have to be a little bit careful because my son's an electrician and he's actually helped build one of those data centers. He jokingly says he's building the Death Star, but so there is a little bit benefit, there's a lot of benefit, I think, to having those in Iowa, but if they want to be in a region, take advantage of lower rates for energy, I think they should build those data centers in those areas.
Appreciate it.
I mean, right now what's happened is they build them in central Iowa, but they want to shop around rates. And I don't know if everybody's aware or not, but your local, like REC, they're responsible for putting in the infrastructure, maintaining the infrastructure, keeping that up and going, having appropriate workers to go out and service in the middle of the night when the weather conditions aren't great, to get the lights back on for us. I'm supportive of those rural electrical corporations all throughout rural Iowa. And I'll be interested to read the 54-page bill when it gets kicked over to us. So thanks.
Thank you,
And,
sir.
and
Yeah.
keep me in the loop too, please.
Yeah, will do, appreciate it. And just to be clear, you know, we're supportive of the data centers and the loads as well. We're happy to have them here. We think they could bring great jobs to the community. We have the ability to serve them. And that ability didn't happen overnight. It happened with, you know, over 50 years of economic development. And to have that pulled away last minute would be, you know, extremely damaging to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Evans. Representative Wills.
But thanks for the question. This is a good question, and this is, believe it or not, this is actually an economic development question or issue. I thought the governor said she would pull out the territory.
She did. She made
Okay.
that commitment. And
Okay, so
we're
that's off the table.
Extremely grateful that she did that, and, you know, tip of the hat to her for welcoming the RECs into the room to have the meeting to understand the language.
So I know a little bit about this bill. I worked on it last year. We passed it in the House last year, pared down version, and then the governor said, hey, I'd like to work on energy policy as a whole next year. And so we pulled it, and so this is the bill that came of that. Service territories was not in our bill last year. This bill is an all of the above energy policy, which is great. That means wind, solar, natural gas, coal, nuclear, and anaerobic digester, which I'll get to that in a second, because this is a really interesting thing. We need an all of the above energy policy in rural Iowa. Right now, we've got development happening around Des Moines. We've got development happening in the urbanized areas where they have infrastructure, where they have sewer, where they have water, where they have electricity. They have plenty of we have plenty of electricity in the state. We need to have more stable forms of electricity, which is where the nuclear comes from. But we have a great energy system in the state. What we need is some of this infrastructure stuff. I'm not so happy. I'm very similar to Representative Jones about ROFR, right of first refusal, which allows utilities to do stuff and refuse people to work on their lines and so forth. I think the RECs are exempt from that, if I'm not mistaken. So what does the energy bill do all in all? It's an all of the above energy bill. Let's talk about the anaerobic digesters, because this is interesting. This is something that will help rural Iowa. I just talked to, through email, Emmitsburg. They have to do a $30 million sanitary sewer upgrade. $30 million for a town of 3,000 people. $30 million. We're not there yet, but anaerobic digesters could solve this problem. Anaerobic digesters, we legalized them a few years ago for animal manure. Mostly dairies, they pump their manure into this anaerobic digester. It superheats that manure. It creates methane, which then can be used to produce electricity. It's a great byproduct. It's a byproduct. So that methane can produce electricity, turn a turbine, and now we've got electricity. We're producing electricity out of this anaerobic digester, but we're making that manure now less impactful to the environment, still has the nutrients that can be spread out onto the farm field and serve farmers, serve our farming industry. What the neat thing is, right now the federal government prohibits this, but anaerobic digesters are cheaper to maintain, cheaper to operate, and cheaper to build than a sanitary sewer system. But the federal government prohibits human waste from being treated in these anaerobic digesters. We're working at trying to get the federal government to loosen those that regulation up, because it superheats that. It kills all the pathogens. The pathogens are the reason that it's not legal. So it kills all the pathogens anyway. Let's use a cheaper, more efficient, better way for our smaller communities to be able to treat their sanitary waste with an anaerobic digester, and at the same time produce electricity, produce methane that produces electricity. So that's just one thing that's in this bill that is economic development that we don't even think about as, you know, us sitting back here in rural Iowa. Why isn't our areas growing? Why isn't industry? Why aren't these data centers coming to Northwest Iowa? Well, we don't have the water. We don't have, and we also don't have wastewater treatment that's available for them. They would love to come up here because we have the electricity, we have wind turbines, we have the renewable energy that they want. So that anaerobic digester is just one small cog in that overall 58-page bill that would really do some good for Northwest Iowa if the federal government would ease their regulations on anaerobic digesters. But really, that bill is an all of the above energy policy. We worked on it last year in the House. I'm on Commerce, and we passed that out of Commerce, and it's a great bill. For the most part, there's some things that maybe the governor has added a thing here or two. She did pull that territory thing, which is a good part. And then ROFR is something that we've got to work through. If that bill comes to the House floor with ROFR on it, I will vote for it. I will tell you that because it's a great bill. I'm a fan of not always being perfect, but doing good. And so that's kind of where I'm at, and I'll leave it with that. Oh, I wanted to say one thing about the last question. This is something that all Iowa citizens should be aware of. We were talking about education budget, and it's 54% or whatever of the budget. Do you know that with education and Medicaid, those two items are 88% of our entire budget? We do everything else in the state of Iowa with 12% of the budget. So every other service that the state of Iowa does is done with 12% except for Medicaid and education. You all should be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wills. And Senator Raleigh.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan, for bringing this up. I didn't get an alert on the subcommittee, but they did meet last Thursday. It was passed out of a subcommittee on Thursday. Senate Study Bill 1112, okay, 1112, all that. It is an omnibus type bill. I mean, there's no question about it. But I'm glad to hear you already sat down with the governor and visited. You pulled out the territory, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and that's the sort of stuff that I was talking about earlier, where this is where you take those bills, you start to work them over. You know, whether it really has legs or not, it hasn't gone in committee or been assigned yet. So it's still in the works. One thing that I realized, didn't realize, we haven't reviewed our energy policy in the state of Iowa for over 20 years. So we're looking at, I think the bill is trying to pull that all together, and it is the governor's bill, to try and pull all these different approaches and strategies together and see if they can lay that out and give direction, you know, for our whole state for energy policy. It's always problematic for you and for the RECs because you have to build out so far in advance. And I get that. And that's something that a lot of people, and I didn't realize either until I got in the legislature and met with you and all the RECs, is that it's so problematic to be making these projections, making these investments, making these rate changes or planning on that for something that may change. And you need that stability. So I'm just glad we're all working together on that bill. And I am on Commerce, and I'll be very, very interested in seeing what your comments are, any communication you want to give to me. I'd really appreciate it. Because, I mean, our number one goal is to have reliable and affordable energy for all of us, whether it's our families or for our commercial and businesses. And
Yep.
I'm huge on economic development in our Northwest Iowa area. I mean, I know we're struggling with workforce. I know we're struggling with affordable housing, all of these other issues. So is everybody. But I'd like to think that we have an opportunity here in Northwest Iowa to make a huge difference and attract a lot of people for the quality of life that we have to offer in Iowa. And sorry, that's my stump speech, but I'll go along with that. So any way I can help and your input, I'd sure appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you, and I appreciate the support and the governor's support on this. Looking forward to working with all of you on how we can improve economic development in rural Iowa and keep Iowa dollars in Iowa. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rowley. Thank you, Ryan, for your question. Our next question comes from Ben Poland. I would invite him to come up to the podium. Ben has a question regarding grain funds.
All right. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Sharifa. My name's Ben Poland with the Clay County Farm Bureau. And know that we have met with all of you and had your support and talk about the Grain Indemnity Fund. But as we've heard in the questions so far this morning and the responses, it's a busy session, that there's always lots of topics and lots of interest vying for attention. And sometimes there's issues that can fall to the side, that can lose oxygen. So really just kind of looking for an update. One of those issues for many of our producers that is of interest is the Grain Indemnity Fund, making sure that it's modernized, increasing limits on it, and then also the consideration looking at adding a price later contracts, which account for almost 50% of our current grain sales. So wondering what's happening at the State House, what's conversations have been, and any movement, any bills with that. And I thank you in advance for your responses.
Thank you, Ben. Senator Evans.
I know in having conversations with members that work on ag, that it's still a priority for them to modernize that grain indemnity fund. And they've talked a couple of different levels. I don't have that in front of me right now, so maybe one of them do. But that's one that has not fallen by the wayside. They're continuing the discussions. I would imagine that something will be passed through our chamber before we get out of here. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. And Representative Jones.
Yeah, so let's step back and talk about the Grain Indemnity Fund for a little bit because there's a lot to learn here. This program has been in place for about 40 years, and basically it is set up to cover losses when a farmer goes bankrupt. And I think right now in our economy and the way things are happening, we need to have a realistic discussion about farmers and making sure that we are able to keep them going. And so so this bill I think is similar to the one that was in the Senate last year. It sounds like it stalled out there, but there's something about deferred payment contracts. Is that right? Okay, so, and that allows the price of grain on the sale to be determined after it's been delivered. And then it looks like there's some other exclusions in the bill, but what this bill is going to do in the House is going to adjust these triggers and then reinstating some two grain indemnity fees. So it looks like it's going to increase the fund from about $16 million or $8 million to $16 million. Are those the right numbers? Okay. So I mean, honestly, like, if this fund is the way to go and to protect these really unfortunate, ugly situations, there's going to have to be more money in that fund because even 16 million. Well, 16 million must be the balance. Yeah.
And I'll make a correction because I know you're not on the Ag Committee anymore.
Right.
So the Grain Indemnity Fund applies to elevators. So it's when
Yes.
an elevator goes bankrupt that they can,
Oh, I'm sorry.
they cover
Yes,
the
yes,
payments for
sorry.
the grain of the farmers.
Yep.
And then, like I said, the price later is the contracts that are sold, and then with the later price, and then that's the 40% of our current sales of grain, which was not covered by the previous bill. So
Right.
as that has become a bigger tool for many of our producers, trying to make sure that that safety net's there for in case the elevator
Yes, I'm
goes,
sorry.
goes
Yes,
bankrupt.
I'm sorry. I apologize. Yeah, it's been a minute since I worked on this, but look, here's the thing. As we've talked about, prices are only increasing, the stakes are only getting bigger. And so we've got to make sure that we're covered here because it's the elevator. We need to make sure that the farmer doesn't go under with the elevator. I'm sorry, and that's where I had that confused. So yeah, we're going to have to work on this. It's scary times, and I'll just give a little bit of example of how scary some of these situations are. So the wool and sheep industry, they pay 2 cents on every pound of wool that they sell. That goes basically into a checkoff, right? So you have like the corn checkoff, the soybean checkoff, that every bushel that you sell, there's some money taken out to go to support things like Corn Promotion Board, those kinds of things. The price of wool is so low that they're not making 2 cents on it to contribute to the checkoff. And so it's tough times in agriculture, as I'm sure everybody is aware, but we've got to make sure that we can insulate and protect as much as we can. So it looks like this bill passed at a subcommittee this week. So we'll keep working on it. I'm sure it's not perfect yet, but it's in the hopper. It's being worked on. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jones. And Senator Raleigh.
Well, I wasn't fast enough to get the Senate version of this bill, but it was in the Senate last year, I remember, and there were a couple bills, I think, trying to address it. I think the corn growers were involved in one bill along that line as well, but I am aware of it. One thing that I didn't realize that you mentioned, 40% are the deferred payment contracts?
Yes, yep.
Of that high?
Yep.
Okay. That's, I did not realize that because when I've been at the meetings, I'd never really heard a percentage on that.
And that's where we talk about the modernization, the amounts are more, but also looking at those tools that are being used by our producers, that if
Yeah.
we're having that safety net, we want to make sure that it's providing what our producers need for what they're
Right,
using.
Right. So that risk is not really, but the indemnity fund would take care of that then as the fund. And no question that the amount, it hasn't been updated since when? It's been quite a while, so.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
I can't give you a date off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But it's been a while.
Yeah, so I'm sure it's alive and well in the Senate. I'm not on the Ag Committee, so I'm going to plead a mea culpa, but I'm very interested in it, and I've met with the Farm Bureau throughout our district, and definitely looking forward to seeing the bill, seeing where it goes from there, and supporting that. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Raleigh. Representative Wills.
Thanks for the question. I do know a little bit about this bill. So let's go into history because I think it's important for everybody to have the context of what this bill does. About 40 years ago, 50 years ago, that's when this grain indemnity was set up, and farmers voluntarily paid, I think, 25 cents per bushel or something like that into the indemnity, and then it got full up to the $8 million. And then it sat there for years. 2 years ago, 2 elevators went under and triggered the indemnity fund. Those 2 elevators drained the indemnity fund, and actually the legislature had to come back and put some money towards that to make sure that farmers were paid off whole from those 2 elevators. And so that's where this whole thing has changed. 40 years ago, 50 years ago, $8 million was thought, oh, that's going to always cover any elevator that should go under. Well, one of the elevators that went under was a specialty grain elevator, organic. So the value of the crops was just higher. Also a little bit more risky. So now we come to today, upping it to 16 million. I no longer sit on agriculture, but I pay close attention to this bill because I think it's so important for our farmers. Up to 16 million, so doubling the grain indemnity should be more than enough to cover any elevators that go under, unless we've got some big elevators, some big co-ops in this state, Nexus and Landus, and if one of those goes under, 16 million is not going to cover it. But we're going to double that, but we're going to add deferred payments, which is Farm Bureau opposed to that, or you guys are for
They're
it?
in support.
Okay, I couldn't remember which side you were on. But deferred payments are basically a farmer puts their grain in an elevator and basically saying that we're gonna be paid for that at a later date. Well, that grain is still in the elevator. If that elevator goes under, they're selling that grain. And so we've got to cover that. That's got to be part of the situation. In the past, it's never been considered that the farmer had sold that grain to the elevator, and so the deferred payments would be just lost. And so it's important that we cover those. It's important that if we're going to truly have a mechanism to safeguard farmers, that we're able to safeguard the farmers, even with grain that they're storing or having a deferred payment on. And so that's where this deferred payment is. I personally, I don't think that 16 million is enough, but we have to kind of draw a line someplace. And it's not something that the state pays, but we do regulate. And so the Secretary of Agriculture kind of keeps track of that, and they get a service fee each year for maintaining that fund. But it is something that will protect farmers in the event that an elevator should happen to go under for whatever reason in the future. And so we hope that doesn't happen, but we need to have a safeguard for our farmers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wills, and thank you, Ben, for the question. Next, I'd like to welcome Ben Unseth to the podium. We have time for about one more question, and his question is in regards to flood relief.
So I'm Ben of the Lesser Beard, and thank you very, very much for getting up on a Saturday morning. We appreciate that. So I have a giant salute and a giant suggestion for Iowa. I was a boyhood Iowan who got lost for many years and then have been privileged to come back again. And last year with the flood here in northwestern Iowa, just thinking about emergency management, it was just phenomenal to me, the way the community came together. You know, we had the Buena Vista football team up helping people with their things, and, you know, everybody local pitched in, but it was astounding to me to watch the state be nimble and get interagency cooperation going with things like the Department of Transportation coming in and helping things. And I thought when the governor and the administrators are sitting in Des Moines, when they're talking about Spencer, Iowa, they have a clue what they're talking about. They've been here, they know somebody from here. And then I met with a number of regional officials from the Federal Emergency Management Administration. And the stunning incompetence and inefficiency was just shocking to me. And then I looked at the Constitution, and the 10th Amendment, I think, is incredibly neglected. It says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution are reserved to the states. There's nothing in the Constitution about emergency management. So my giant suggestion would be, is there a way that the Iowa legislature could send a resolution to the Iowa Attorney General to enforce the 10th Amendment and to reserve the powers of emergency management to the state of Iowa? Because wildfires in California are radically different from a hurricane in Florida or a flood in northwest Iowa. And one size fits all doesn't work. And people 1,000 miles away have no idea how to help out in Iowa. But we know how to help ourselves. So that would be my big suggestion, possible question for you.
Thank you, Ben, for your comment and your question. Looking at the time, what we're going to do is I'm going to allow each of the senators and representatives to answer the question and also provide any closing comments. So with that, we are going to start with Representative Jones.
Thank you, Sharifa, and thank you, Ben. I love this question. I have kind of been on a FEMA rampage this last week for a number of different reasons, and Senator Rowley called me out on it as when we were walking in. And if you're interested, I was on Simon Conway earlier this week. He's on WHO, and he's kind of a spicy guy, and he doesn't really take kindly to government waste. And I had reached out to him about a Facebook post that he had made that was very appropriate, and where he had questioned some federal funding as it related to FEMA, and he was spot on. And I appreciate that he's willing to bring attention to this issue. And I told him, I said, Simon, my district we need those funds. And in this case, it was 58 or 59 million dollars that was at question. And I said, what my communities could have done with that. I said, we didn't have 911 services for 17 days, and we need $8 million to repair that system. And here we are, pinching pennies and scrambling to try to find some cash so that we can get our 911 services back up to par, so that if we ever face that emergency again, that we won't have to rely on Dickinson County and not have pagers to call out our fire department. I'm pretty wound up about it. Anyways, so your question, you are spot on. Now, what I will say is we have a new team in Washington, D.C., and they are also not taking kindly to organizations like FEMA, who are inefficient and wasteful, and who aren't working on behalf of the people of the United States of America. And so we're having those discussions, but I think what's going to happen ultimately is that the federal government is just going to start block granting money for emergency services rather than being engaged in this process, because they're not good at it. And you're exactly right. The governor came in right away. She came in, Director Durham. I will never forget being at Iowa Lakes, and she brought her whole team. She brought her whole board. She brought everybody. She brought the National Guard and the public safety. Everybody was there in that room, and she did that for us because she knew that she needed all the boots on the ground. And so they came to us, and they know how, they have the resources to make stuff work, and they know how to handle disaster management. And so I think that's probably the way to go, is to let the feds just block grant it, and then we can handle the business from here, because you're exactly right. Floods in Iowa are different than fires in California, and our needs are different, and the way that we can go about this stuff is different too. So we're gonna need some help from the state, we're gonna need some help from the feds, but if the federal government could just let us handle the business of Iowa, that would be preferable, and I think we're headed in that direction. Closing comments, I appreciate you all being here. Senator Evans and I have another forum at 11:30, but it's in Storm Lake, and so we have to scoot on out of here, and I think the Dickinson County folks have one up there as well. So I apologize, we're not gonna be able to stick around a whole lot, and I can't shortchange Storm Lake because if you haven't heard, our district is home to the Teacher of the Year, and Melanie Bloom is an incredible asset to our area. She's a FFA teacher at Sioux Central, and it's been a minute since we've had an FFA teacher be Teacher of the Year, and she's being honored tonight in Ankeny at the FFA Enrichment Center at the Black Tie and Blue Jackets and Black Tie event. And so Will, my husband, was one of her first students, and so she asked us to come be at her to be at her table, and that's a huge honor for us. And so I can't shortchange Storm Lake because I can't shortchange Melanie on the back end of tonight. So but I always appreciate the opportunity to be here. Shoot me an email, send me a text. I'm happy to be in communication with you on these issues. This is not the only time that you have to reach out to us or to ask questions. I'm pretty good about responding. I was responding to some emails on FEMA, actually about 3 o'clock this morning. So I can't always guarantee that I'm going to be awake, but I'm pretty quick on the response and always willing to work on issues. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jones. And Senator Rowley.
Yep. Thank you, Ben of the lesser beard. Correct? Yeah, I want to address you correctly and all that. Now, I have to tell you, when the floods came and all that happened, I mean, I was impressed with emergency management in Iowa, DOT, DNR, the IEDC, Durham, Director Durham, and the governor being down here or up here several times to tour, the East Leach Park area, and we were all together on that, and got to see that. Your suggestion, I find, is really interesting, and Representative Jones stole my thunder a little bit, because block grants seems like the best way to handle this sort of situation, and FEMA has not made a good name for itself in the last, I don't know how many years, and especially what happened in the Carolinas, and then, of course, what we had to deal with here. I think Governor Reynolds stepped right in, too, and said, hey, we're using state contractors. We're using people from Iowa that are going to do the work and work with them. And FEMA just, they had to be, kind of put off to the side on some of this as it went along. I think the suggestion of a resolution is fantastic. It falls right in place with all the things that are going on with Governor Reynolds' efforts, Senator Ernst's efforts on Make 'em Squeal, as far as inefficiencies, and the whole concept of DOGE, which is, of course, efficiency and how we can do things. I totally agree. Iowans can do it best because we know our territory. There's an old saying that if you're a salesperson, know your territory. And that's where we live, and that's where our families are raised, and that's where our future is. So I appreciate the suggestion. I'll just sum up mine by saying it's a pleasure being here again. And I'm just looking forward to any communications that you have for me. You can always reach me at my email, legislative, or ask me for my cell phone. And I always try to be as accessible as possible for you. And we talked about a lot of information here. Please contact me and let me know the suggestions you have on certain bills, certain ideas that you may have. And I look forward to working with you and seeing you again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rowley. Representative Wells.
Thanks, Ben, for the question. I will tell you this is a passion of mine. So I will say BOLB, not to be confused with BOGB. Ben of the greater beard, Ben of the lesser beard. I'm a military guy, so I got to have acronyms thrown in there somehow. And everybody's wondering, what the heck is he talking about? Okay, so 10th Amendment, 100% spot on. I will tell you this. I could name a half dozen government agencies that aren't constitutional. EPA, Board of Education. I could do that. They're there. We got to deal with them, but we could, and I think the Trump administration will, do block grants versus having the bureaucracy of that inefficient structure spending more money in the bureaucracy than they are actually on the ground. I've not talked to a single person who's dealt with FEMA who likes them. And they're supposed to be our saviors and rescuers. So I will tell you, in response, I have a bill that's not out of drafting because they're so backed up, and I love this bill. I think that we got to do this, and if it's not this year, next year, hopefully I got support. I have a bill that creates the Iowa Guard. Right now we have the National Guard, which is the national organization that takes a federal proclamation from the president for the National Guard to be activated for a disaster and that sort of thing. The governor can do some things short term, but not long term. I have a bill that takes that power back and says we're going to create an Iowa Guard in the state of Iowa, very similar to like 20 some other states have. Texas and Florida are the two most famous ones. And that Iowa Guard will be controlled directly by the governor. They could have been here before the flood even happened. On the ground, they could assess the situation, be in charge of the situation until the emergency management folks get here, hand it off, and then support the situation. That's what they do. The Iowa Guard would be there and provide that initial service to that community that has the service. They would be stationed across the state of Iowa so that they would be very quickly able to react. The governor could call them up directly and say, I need somebody from my Iowa Guard right there, and they're already there. So we need to take back some of our powers. We need to do some of that stuff on our own and basically say, federal government, you have no right to tell us when we can or can't activate our Iowa Guard. And we just need to have our own. Now, will it cost a little bit of money to set up? Yes, but we need to do it. And so I want to thank you all for being here. I've said enough, but thanks for the question. Passion of mine, we need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wills. And Senator Evans.
Yeah, well, my Senate district encompasses Representative Jones' district as well as, to the west. So I had a number of communities that were affected by the flood: Spencer, Sioux Rapids, Cherokee, and those surrounding areas. One thing I want, hopefully, because this is getting broadcast so people will hear this out there, phenomenal job by our emergency management directors locally. Phenomenal. These are people who get trained annually. They update their plans. They involve all the city and county agencies in developing those plans, never in hopes of having to use them. Their training paid off on those days, I can tell you right there. So we have some great people that need to be thanked. If you can, thank them personally. Send them a note. I'm sure they would appreciate hearing it because it was outstanding. What you also saw is that the efforts of the government, or the governor, in making our state government smaller and more efficient, it became more nimble, as you mentioned. She had her entire team in Spencer. I followed them on multiple occasions from Spencer and then down to Cherokee because she would make the visits on the same days. And to have your entire team, I mean, she would bring 6 people at a time and address issues and questions. She was hearing it from the local community. They were eyes on it, feet on the ground. She did flyovers, so she had aerial view of everything. So a lot of credit to the governor and her foresight in making our state government a lot more efficient. And I love that you brought up the 10th Amendment, because people that are sitting here, if you've attended many of these, I've brought up the 10th Amendment on a few occasions, and separation between federal powers and state powers. I love the idea of firing a resolution off from the AG's office. I would like to see maybe put our heads together and see if we can craft something and fire that off. Yeah, we need to start pushing back against the federal government. We have, I think the moment in time is here that we could do this effectively and send the message from the state of Iowa that we want to control what is given to us in the Constitution, and federal government get out of the way. A number of agencies that are not constitutional, the only way they can get us to do their bidding is by dangling a carrot. So they offer funds. They can't make us do it because they don't have the constitutional authority to. But if there are funds attached and you want those funds, you have to play by our rules. So that's how we have to attack it. Block grants was brought up. I think there's other ways that we can address that as well. But thank you very much for bringing that up. I'm on Forum 1 of 3 for the day. So I'll be heading with Representative Jones to Storm Lake, and she'll take off and head to Ankeny. Wish I was going that way. But I have a forum at 5 o'clock this evening if you'd like to attend. It is in Geza, Iowa, of all places. I've had a number of forums in Geza. They're always well attended, not to be confused with Gaza. I'm not flying over to the Middle East. Geza between Primgar and Paulina. It'll be at the Producers Co-op. They clear out their warehouse for us, and we'll have, I would imagine, weather permitting, we'll have 100 or more people there because they just love to attend. One of our keynotes we have invited in for this one is Tamara Scott, who is our Iowa Republican National Chairwoman. So she's going to be there to speak and present. So if you've never heard her speak, that would be an opportunity for you to do so. So that's at 5 o'clock this evening. And I really, again, want to thank Chamber and Clay County Farm Bureau for this event, and appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Evans. I know we're a few minutes over. However, I'd like to thank everyone for attending again today and for the great questions. On behalf of the Spencer Chamber, thank you again to our legislators for being here and giving of your time and everything that you do for us at the State House. As we have mentioned, you both have schedules to keep, so we're going to keep this moving and get you out of here. Thanks again to the Spencer Police Department, the Spencer Radio Group, Spencer Daily Reporter, Spencer Municipal Utilities, and MediaCom. The next Eggs and Issues session will be Saturday, March 29th, here in this same room. If you're looking for any other follow-up based on questions from today, there is a Veterans Coffee at the office on March 12th from 1 to 4 p.m., and that address is 505 2nd Avenue West, Suite C. One topic we did not talk about today is childcare. Currently, the city and a child care task force is in the planning stages and getting surveys out. We would encourage all providers, employers, as well as parents who have children 12 or younger to complete these surveys. They are specific surveys based on that, based on where you fall within that, and we are doing this through First Children's Finance. With that, I would adjourn this and welcome to see all of you back on Saturday, March 29th. Thank you again.